Now that we understand why we should conduct audience analysis and also some of the things that we should look at when conducting audience analysis, let's talk about how we actually go about conducting this audience analysis and then using it in our speeches. So the first way that we conduct audience analysis is through what we call direct observation. And direct observation basically is just when we talk with our classmates and we observe their conversations and we get to know their personalities. Now, that's a little bit more difficult in an online setting, right? Because we don't have as many opportunities to get to know each other face to face, which is why I have discussion boards that allow you all to start to get to know one another. So hopefully you've kind of gotten to know each other through some of these discussion boards that we have, or at least you will have done by the time that we get to our first speech. So there's lots of ways that you can directly observe, right? You can listen in on people's conversations. You can have conversations with other people and see what sorts of things they're interested in. You could also just kind of look around the room and see what races are sitting in that room, what the gender difference is in the room, what the age bracket is in the room, right? There's lots of things that we can just observe from our audience. Sometimes, however, we're not going to get all of the information that we need simply by having conversations or by looking at someone. So in some cases, it's necessary for us to conduct interviews and surveys in order to get the information that we need. Now, your textbook goes into a lot more detail about how to conduct these interviews and surveys. So if you are interested in conducting these, I highly suggest that you take a look at the book. In addition, you could also do focus groups, which is kind of just like a larger interview, right? If an interview is one-on-one, you asking structured questions to one audience member, a focus group takes a handful of those audience members and asks them a set of structured questions. Whereas if you pass out a survey, right, you get to hit a lot of people, but you don't have to talk to them necessarily. You could just have them answer and fill out questions on a sheet of paper. So these are all different ways that you can kind of gather a lot of data about your audience in one fell swoop. In addition to these, you could also use existing data that exists from your audience or about your audience. So for example, if you go to your school's website, or rather if you just Google the name of your school and demographics, oftentimes it will pull up charts and graphs with the demographics of the school that you go to. So, for example, it might show the proportion of white to Hispanic to Black students. It might show the full-time students. It might show the gender distribution. It might show the age of the students. All sorts of data exists about students at various different schools. And so you can take this existing data and learn about your potential audience based on that data. Once you have all of this content, once you have all of this information about your audience, you now have to prepare the content of your speech with your audience in mind. So you have to take time and thought and preparation in order to make your speech the best speech that it can be and the one that keeps the audience in the forefront of the mind the most. And conducting this sort of audience analysis really helps you to interact more effectively with the audience and identify their interests and what they are going to like and perhaps not like about your speech. Having this information helps you to adjust your speech on the fly if something isn't working for your audience, because you can take those sort of things into consideration. Finally, you can always adjust your speech based on your analysis. And this goes for before you give the speech as well as while you are giving it. You will always get feedback from the audience while you're giving a speech that you can then adjust your speech accordingly. For example, if your audience is looking confused because they come from a different major than you do, so they don't understand the language that you're using, you might need to adjust that language based on the fact that there are other majors in the room. But you could also adjust that language in advance of that confusion happening, right? So you can take all of this into consideration while you are preparing your speech so that you run into fewer problems on your speech day. So that's what we can do with audience analysis. As you can see, it's a very powerful tool. And we have to keep our audience in mind at all times when we are writing our speeches, because they're going to affect not only the topic that we talk about, but also the research that we choose to conduct on that topic and the way that we choose to organize our speech and even the way that we deliver it, right? Audience is a key factor in the speech making process.